Good afternoon, everybody. It is Tuesday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, digital sports producer for the Post-Gazette. I'm joined today by Noah Hiles, our Pitt football, basketball beat reporter, who also dabbles in a lot of other things here on the YouTube channel, for a Pittsburgh sports State of the Union address. There's going to be the big speech tonight in Washington, D.C. President Joe Biden will be addressing the houses of Congress to talk about the state of our national union. We're not going to talk about any politics here because
No.
you're not here for that. You're here for fun, right, Noah?
Yeah. I saw a balloon fly over my house. It was actually just a black and gold balloon. So it's telling me to talk sports, not anything else.
Exactly. So what we're going to talk to you about is what are the state of our Pittsburgh teams, the Steelers, the Pirates, the Penguins, Pitt and Penn State football. We'll get into a little bit of Pitt basketball too. We're going to talk about the state of those teams, what we think the outlook is for them in the near term and the long term, and then we're going to get into policy prescriptions. How can we make things better in the next year? How can these teams move the ball proverbially down the field to help themselves improve? Me and Noah, we have the answers. We're going to give them to you, just like the president hopes to tonight. So Noah, I'm going to start with the Steelers. They're the biggest name in town. They're the team people invest the most energy in. So obviously we're going to start with them. Noah, what's your outlook for the Steelers? What is the state of the Steelers here at the beginning of February 2023?
So I for every team that we're going to discuss, I thought of 3 words or less to kind of start my point of view on them. For the Steelers, it's we're not old. And that's something that's been a problem, and I think that's held the Steelers back is age, just with contracts connected with not even just Ben Roethlisberger. That's obviously the most notable one that having him stick around, I think, kind of delayed the progress of what the team would be like after he left. And at the quarterback position, and not being able to allocate financial resources elsewhere. But a lot of those just older guys are gone now, and it's a young roster with a lot of potential. And so now that it's not an old team, it needs to stop acting like an old team in the offseason. The idea of building things the Steeler way, it doesn't need to be done that way anymore. It doesn't have a traditional general manager that it's had for 20 plus years. It doesn't have a lot of old coaches who have been around the building forever. It's a more fresh fuel with this organization, with a new quarterback, some new faces on offense. And while they have some savvy, proven guys on the defensive side of the ball, I think that this offseason could mark the start of the building of a new, really good Steelers team in the near future. And that's going to come by having a good draft, making some good signings in free agency, and really building around the guy that they took in the first round last year with Kenny Pickett. And I'm really excited to see how they go about doing that. Me personally, I think this entire draft should be focused on whatever can be done to make him the best player possible next year. That means getting him weapons. That means getting him people to protect him. I don't know what order you go in priority there, but build around the young. Like I said, we're young now. That's the 3-word scenario I have to describe the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, I have a similar tack, Noah. I think it's morning in Steelers Nation, and I think there is reason to be optimistic. There's reason to be sunny, but there are things that need to happen for this team to be good. And I think the thing for me is that Kenny Pickett is on that rookie contract. He doesn't cost you much money. Mitch Trubisky might cost you a little bit, as our own Jerry Dulac reported today. The Steelers want to keep him around. That might have a somewhat heavy cap hit, but you're still going to be investing far less in your quarterbacks this season and in the seasons to come than they did when they were paying Ben Roethlisberger tens of millions of dollars every year. And so you only get that window once if a quarterback turns out to be good. And if Kenny Pickett turns out to be good, he's going to be wanting that $30 million probably by the end of that deal. So you've got to be aggressive with the resources you have now. And so for me, you have to be ruthless with some things. I know the Steelers feel good about some of the guys that they've developed, but if I'm them, I'm looking to spend money on a cornerback in free agency, big money. Maybe not over a huge term, like not like a 6 or 7 year contract, but over 3-4 years, that period of time when Kenny Pickett's going to be here. I think getting that number one guy is an important way that you can spend resources. Then maybe you draft a young corner You have Cam Sutton in the building. Suddenly the secondary is really looking like a strength with Minkah Fitzpatrick locked up for the long term. I also look at those tackle spots. Was there growth on this offensive line this past year? Absolutely. But no one should have a scholarship here, Noah. I think
No.
you've got to bring in young guys on the offensive line, but I'd like to see some veterans added to that group as well. I think that's one thing it kind of lacks is that one guy who's kind of in command. I'm thinking of an Alan Faneca type, from those Super Bowl runs. I'm looking to see if they will add someone like that, and I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that they're going to show that type of aggression. So, I think that there are some reasons to be optimistic as a Steelers nation, but I do think we need to start seeing, some recognition from policymakers that it's not just going to happen automatically. And the NFL world has changed, and so much of the Steelers' next decade is going to be based on what do you do in this 4 to 5 year window when the talent you have is cheap and you're developing it. I think that's huge.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think you hit on a lot of good points where there are leaders clearly on one side of the ball, maybe a veteran presence on the offensive side of the ball through free agency. I think multiple additions could be made to the offensive line, and bringing in maybe one veteran tackle and then drafting another tackle would be the right way to go about it. Whereas on defense, yeah, you could sign people, or you could use the experience that you have on that side of the ball and the financial capital to justify maybe taking a young player there. There's so many possibilities with this team. Again, I think the biggest point of emphasis should be building around Kenny Pickett, because even while the defense had some flaws last year, I think when number 90 was on the field, it was a pretty good defense. And you just got to bank on him being around. And you can make small additions there, but build around your quarterback. He's the young future of this team, whether you like it or not. That's what the route they chose to go when they drafted him in the first round last year. So yeah, be aggressive, and it's got to all be around maximizing Kenny Pickett's potential.
Well, and the last thing I'll say is that, it's possible Kenny Pickett doesn't turn out, but none of these fundamentals are going to change if you end up going after another younger quarterback in the next couple of years. If Kenny Pickett proves not to be your guy, you still want to emphasize the window where they're affordable and that they have a contract that allows you to do things that you can't do with the Ben Roethlisberger. I think all of this is good business, whether or not Kenny Pickett turns out to be the guy for this team. I think he has the potential. I'm not saying he won't be. I'm just saying the policy prescriptions we're offering here, Noah, I think can apply universally, whether it's Kenny Pickett or whether it's someone else who's in that young category. Next up, Noah, I wanted to get into the Pirates. They will be starting up soon. We've done a lot of talk here with Jason Mackey on the channel about what's your expectations for a 100 loss team in 2022? How much ground can you gain in 1 year? How much will these free agent signings that they've made kind of stepping out of character this offseason? What's your outlook for this team? Knowing that the things have been a little bit different this offseason than they've been in recent years.
My definition for the Pirates right now, the state of the Pirates is, That's it. It's just, it's interesting. I feel like you said, it's a little different. I mean, they haven't spent crazy money. While they have started bringing in, other players and not just McCutcheon. I really like the trade to get, is it Choi, the first baseman?
G-Man Choi, yes.
Yeah, Choi, and then bringing in Santana, who obviously is off a really bad season, but still a player who knows how to get on base, a guy who's been around on some deep playoff runs during his time in Cleveland, and other additions too. Rich Hill, a couple of other arms on top of that. The Pirates are at least intriguing this year. I think they're going to be watchable, and the reasons you're watching aren't just to see the other team they're playing or because one or two young guys are capable of doing something excitement. I think there's a lot to pay attention to for this Pirates team this year. I think you can pay attention to the development of a couple very promising arms in that starting rotation. I think you can pay attention to the development of the left side of that infield, that if it maximizes its true potential, it could be one of the top 10 left sides of the infield in baseball with Hayes and O'Neal Cruz. They have the defensive talent over there at the hot corner and just such a unique athlete at shortstop. Not sure how long he'll be at shortstop, but for the time being, those are two really fun players to watch. And then you have other guys who we might see come up this year with Andy Rodriguez and Henry Davis, and who knows what young outfielders could come up, and maybe we see a Oliver Peguero back up here and other young arms. I think that this year for the Pirates has potential to be 2011. If people remember 2011 for the Pirates, that was Clint Hurdle's first year where he came in, and it was at that point where all the young core that produced those 3 postseason appearances, they were all finally up, and they were all starting to really find their footing in the big leagues. And the Pirates have some of those spots filled now. I'm not sure everyone will be up on opening day, but I think by the final game in 2023, a lot of the cornerstones of the Pirates' next competitive team will be in the major leagues. And I think that that's reason to be excited. So I say, it's not a hooray. I don't think they're going to be competing for the playoffs, even with this extended, postseason format that the MLB has now. But I think the 100 loss seasons have come to an end, hopefully, on the North Shore.
I'm going to take the other side of this debate, Noah. The people might be hissing and booing in the galleries as I make these statements. I think the state of the Pirates is ominous. You brought up 2011 as the season you'd hope it would be for the Steelers, or for the Pirates, where they take that next step. I'm looking at this kind of like 2003, where the cracks in this rebuild are starting to show. And that's the reason that Ben Cherington had to go out and sign a number of veteran players to fill these holes where young players should be showing up in year 4 of a rebuild, at least getting an opportunity to play. And granted, we will see some of them, and some of these guys are not going to be here. The Pirates probably want to trade Rich Hill. They probably want to trade, G-Man Choi if things work out. And, granted, I will acknowledge that. But I feel a lot of 2003 vibes here. I'm thinking of Jeff Suppan. I'm thinking of Randall Simon. I'm thinking of Reggie Sanders. I'm thinking of Matt Stairs. That Pirates team was decent. It won 75 games, I believe.
Yeah.
But the organization wasn't where it needed to be at that stage of Dave Littlefield's rebuild. And we started to see those cracks in subsequent years. And that's how, 10 losing seasons for the Pirates became 20, because they didn't develop the way that they needed to. And my big concern with this club right now is, I look at some of the stat projections. I did the Zips projections a couple of weeks ago. There's not a lot of impact coming from the bats of the guys that they've developed. Yes, O'Neal Cruz is going to be a source of power, but Brian Hayes, really, he's relying on his glove right now in the projections. Andy Rodriguez is probably the other big name of a guy who could come up and be a young player who contributes with his bat. But some of these outfielders, the projection models are just not as sunny on them as you would like them to be as they're getting to these upper stages of the minor leagues and hoping to earn those big league promotions. So I think the state of the Pirates is ominous, and I think this year you have to show more in the way of development. That's what Ben Cherington's front office was brought in to do. That's how he was going to distinguish himself from Neil Huntington. I don't think he's really done that to this point. I think we've continued to see a lot of these quad A players, guys who, look pretty good in Double A and then kind of maintain it in Triple A, but just can't make that impact in the major leagues. I think we need to start seeing impact from more guys than just the players we're expecting. We need to see more than from O'Neal Cruz, Andy Rodriguez. This rebuild is going to fail if those guys don't turn out. Absolutely. Well, I think we need to see some players that we're not expecting begin to show us that they can make impacts as well.
I think a big thing with Cherington, though, is a lot of the players that he picked up. I mean, that's his MO, is getting super young talent. And so we're finally going to start to see some of the 18, 19-year-olds that he acquired a couple years ago rising up. And you talked about filling those cracks. A lot of the cracks that are being filled are back-end starting pitching, first base, and outfield. And if you look at the major prospects acquired by Cherington since he's arrived, either through the draft or through trades, not a lot of those pieces were outfielders. It's more, I think, his organizational strategy is overload with infielders and then transition those infielders into outfielders. I do think that they have one outfielder that's young at the major league level that's at least we're getting a little excited over, with Jack Sawinski, who, while, yes, struggled to hit over 200, showed some major pop. And with a left-handed bat and his size, and I think he's only 23, 24 years old, I could see him being like a Garrett Jones type for this next competitive team. And while that's not a franchise changing player, that's someone you can bank on. And I think that that's one thing. And when we talk about other cracks as far as the outfield, I think the infield, you're going to have enough to really depend on there with what they have in the system. Like you said, it's filling the outfield, it's filling the pitching. Pitching is a concern for myself as well as far as development, because I don't care if it's Ben Cherington, Huntington, Littlefield, whoever. The Pirates can't develop pitching. It's just been a curse of theirs. They've gotten lucky a couple times when they had a first overall pick with Garrett Cole, and nothing was going to derail him. But overall, yeah, it's getting the most out of the Quentin Priesters and people of those likes who really need to step up and be the first round picks that they were. But if we're talking bat talent, I mean, there's so many infield stars, I think, that are coming up through the minor leagues. Eventually, some of these guys are going to move to the outfield. You look at someone even like Tamar Johnson, their first round pick this last year. I mean, he could be an outfielder, and that could expedite his progression through the minor leagues. Henry Davis, I wouldn't be shocked to see playing the outfield one day, because he wasn't an incredibly high regarded defensive catcher, and they already have another good catching prospect with Endy Rodriguez. I think there are options there as far as offense is concerned, but that 0-3 comparison hits home for me, Adam, because like you said, that lineup was good. And the same could be said for the team the following year when it had Kenny Lofton and Aramis Ramirez until, it made one of the many horrible trades. Or was that was an 0-3, right?
That was 0-3, and
Yeah,
that's why
yes.
that's why it's such a problematic comparison as well, because of the Brian Reynolds conversation that we're having. There's a lot of parallels there between Aramis Ramirez and Brian Reynolds.
Yeah, and I think it's a little different. The state of the franchises are a little different at that point in time. I think if you go back to 0-3, I mean, that was a team that was far more aggressive. In Aramis's earlier years, they were spending more money because they had a new ballpark. This team hasn't spent any money in like 5 years. So I think that now they're starting to be a little bit more aggressive because they're trying to find the Russell Martins, the AJ Burnett's, the veteran guys to be around there for when these young players come up. And, it really does come down to, like what you said, Cherington's ability to put a system in place that can develop these prospects. I like a lot of the guys that were acquired through drafts. Some of the trades don't look that great. You look at the returns that came through on some deals, like the Josh Bell deal, for example. That doesn't look like it was that great of a trade. But there are others. The Adam Frazier trade doesn't look bad right now. Just the Yankees trade with Tyone looks like it end up pretty well with Contreras coming in that one. There, you can pick and choose here. So we'll see. That's why I went with rather than or yay. I think this is, I guess, the time where we find out what we really have in the farm system, which isn't something to be scared of, in my opinion. It's also not something to be super excited about. It's just, all right, well, let's see what's actually happening right now.
Yeah, I think that's why I chose ominous as my word, Noah. I think there's still reason for optimism. I don't think ominous means that, sometimes the thunderstorm misses you, right? Like sometimes it goes around and you get to keep swimming at the pool with your fans, your family, and your buddies. But, I think we've got to see some things, and I think it's a little more urgent, than maybe some other people do. Next team I want to get into, Noah, what is the state of the Penguins? I think this is going to be an interesting discussion. They started slow, got hot, started slow again. They've been a very streaky team going back to that playoff series with the Rangers. They've had a hard time protecting leads. Goaltending has been an issue. The bottom six has been an issue. What is your assessment of the state of the Penguins at this point?
My definition for the Penguins is vanilla ice cream. I know exactly what I'm getting when I watch this team every year. Everyone's freaking out. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to tell you now, you don't need to tune in. You could keep reading our coverage, keep doing that, but you don't need to tune in on the radio or TV. Here's how the Penguin season is going to go. They're going to get hot in late February, early March, probably around the time Jari comes back. They're going to string together some wins. They're going to get into the playoffs. Everyone on the radio and on the TV is going to be saying, hey, hitting their stride at the right time this season. Reminds me a lot of 2016 or 2017. This Penguins team, it might be different. And then they're going to lose in the first round because that's just what this organization is right now. And I'm not saying the Penguins are a terrible organization. I don't think they are at all. But I think I've just come to the conclusion that this core that they spent a lot of money to bring back and continue having take the ice every single game. I don't think that they're going to produce another Stanley Cup here. I think that they're going to be capable to win a lot of hockey games and for a couple more seasons play some quality hockey between the three of them. And then, maybe two of them will still be able to keep going later on. But yeah, this is a good team, not a great team. And there's not much that it's able to really do right now to change that status one way or another. It's just kind of stuck in this semi, upper middle class, I guess you could say. It has a nice little home in the suburbs, but it's never going to be a millionaire anymore, Adam.
Yeah, the state of the Pirates, or excuse me, the Penguins for me is stubborn and arrogant. I think there is a lot of inflexibility with the way this team is going about its roster construction right now. You're getting what you wanted to get from this core. Sidney Crosby's doing enough. Getting Malkin's doing enough. Chris Letang's doing enough. When Tristan Jarry's been able to be healthy, he's done enough, but he hasn't been healthy, and that's really hurt this franchise over the last couple of years. And I think the frustrating part about this team is watching guys like Kasperi Kapanen and watching guys like Jeff Carter struggle. Those were moves that people were not in favor of at the time. Jeff Carter was already getting old at the time. They caught lightning in a bottle with him in that one playoff run, but he's kind of struggled since. He's well on the back half of his career. He's never had the skill set that Sidney Crosby or Getting Malkin's had. He's not going to age as well as those guys, and that's what we're seeing. Kasperi Kapanen, what did he do to justify that investment in the offseason? There was a lot of guys they brought back from last season's team. They didn't really make an attempt to shake things up. We have seen the results of that with this, what I would consider to be a pretty mediocre team, borderline playoff team. And, I'm optimistic like you are that they can go on a run at the end of the season to make the playoffs. But getting into that next level, they show no sense of urgency or recognition that something has to change for them to actually win a Stanley Cup. And I think GM Ron Hextall has got to do what I think Jim Rutherford did very well. I know it's very in vogue among Penguins Twitter right now to kind of hate on Jim Rutherford, especially with what he's doing in Vancouver. He's kind of making a mess of things there. So I get the hate some Penguins fans have for him at this point. But one thing he was very good at, Noah, was recognizing when he made a mistake and cutting bait. And that is the opposite of what Ron Hextall has done as general manager of the Penguins. He has doubled down on pretty much every move he's made. I think we're seeing the results of that. So I think that's the state of the team, is stubborn and arrogant. And my policy prescription would be to stop doing that, to look at how constantly be assessing what have you done right, what have you done wrong. I think there have to be some major changes on this bottom six. I don't know what the salary cap situation, whether that's something you can do by the end of this season. I don't know if this is a team that can be fixed. But if you only have a couple more years with Crosby and Malkin and Letang after this, you really have to start getting those decisions right beginning with this offseason.
It's vanilla ice cream, Adam. You're never going to pass up vanilla ice cream, but it's no one's favorite. It's just boring. It's good. It's ice cream. The playoffs are ice cream. Everyone wants to watch playoff hockey, and it's fun. It's been a staple in the spring for Pittsburghers since I was like in fifth grade. And that's great. But it's not Rocky Road. It's not chocolate chip cookie dough or whatever it is. Like whatever your favorite flavor is. It's good enough to be watchable, and that's about it. We need some sprinkles, Hextall. We need some chocolate chips. We need some I don't know, some extra stuff. Make it happen.
Yeah, got to make some moves. I agree. Noah, let's pivot to your beats, plural.
Okay.
We'll start with Pitt football. What is the state of the Panthers after, I think on some levels it was a disappointing season because they weren't competing at the ACC title level that I think a lot of Pitt fans were thinking they were going to be at every single year. But you did also win 9 games, and you proved that you can, be that above average program and that you're starting to round into that. What is your outlook for Pitt football right now?
I'll go with District 7, otherwise known as the WPIAL, because that is what is going to make or break Pitt football in the upcoming seasons. It has been a total reload of local talent this offseason at the quarterback position. There is a young running back coming in, Derek Davis, obviously switching over from the defensive side of the ball to running back coming from LSU. You see the entire Pitt defense, essentially from the secondary to the defensive line and everything in between. It's going to have a lot of local talent as well. And we're going to find out, if that local talent, you read it, how there are less WPIAL guys going to Power 5 teams, and the local talents died down a little bit, even though District 7 still is well represented in the state championships every year in football. We're going to see. We're going to see. And if it works out, I think it's something that could be huge for the future of Pitt football. If guys like Jakovic come in here and be a success, and guys like Donovan McMillan and Derek Davis and even MJ Devonshire, guys who were 4-stars, went to the SEC, they come back here and have great careers for the Panthers and go on to have success in the NFL, that's going to allow Pitt to do something it has not done very well since Pat Narduzzi took over, and that is land 4-stars that play in its backyard. The 4-stars have been going elsewhere. Some of them go to that rival opponent that Pitt has in the middle of the state. And if for a program that struggles to really land 4-star talent consistently, it's getting a little better that it already has 2 in its class of 2024. Being able to get the ones in the backyard will be a tremendous help. And while there aren't as many as there were 10, 20, 30 years ago, the young players in this area, like the Tyquay Hayeses at Aliquippa or the Quentin Martin, a 5-star running back at Bell Vernon right now, being able to prevent those people from leaving, that makes your program better. And using the transfer portal on top of that will allow for those 8-9 win seasons to become a regular thing rather than oh, wow, this was a good year type thing. So it all comes down to the WPIAL for Pitt football. That's my state of the union for the Panthers. What about you, Adam?
My state of the Pitt Panthers is cautious. I think, the big question for me is a lot of these big NFL caliber names have moved on from that ACC championship team. Whatever Pitt does next year, the year after that, is going to be kind of a different thing. And that is, I think that's the next step you have to take is, okay, you had the great season. Okay, you proved that, it wasn't just a fluke. Now you got to prove that you can sustain it.
Yep.
And that you can, because that's how Penn State becomes Penn State, right? Penn State sustained it over a period of time from 2016, to winning the Rose Bowl this year. They were winning those big games a lot more frequently than we've seen Pitt do it. Pitt needs to make, kind of to your point, 9 wins kind of needs to start being the floor here. You've got to start ripping off those 10-win seasons. You've got to start getting to those big bowl games. Especially in the ACC, where I think making those bowl games can make a huge difference. For Penn State, if we're making the comparison to the team out east, you got Ohio State and Michigan. So even when Penn State wins the Rose Bowl, is the buzz the same as it is for Ohio State and Michigan, who are in the playoff and playing in bigger games? Pitt has the ability to put itself above a lot of programs in the ACC by, showing a little consistency. And if you can get to a New Year's Six Bowl 3 out of 4 years, 4 out of 6, something like that. I think it's going to be really hard for the North Carolinas of the world and the Louisvilles of the world and things to compete like that. And I think that's what we've seen with Clemson, right? Is that Clemson was never this, constant powerhouse program until it started just winning consistently. And then after it did that 9-10 win stuff, it started winning 11. It started winning 12 because it placed itself above so much of that ACC fold. I think the Panthers have an ability to put themselves in that category, but it's going to have to be a different cast of characters doing it. So that's why I'm curious to see, can you build on more than just having one good team and part of the legacy of it the following year? Can you have another really good one in short order?
Well, you mentioned Clemson, and I think that kind of goes back to my WPIAL point. You want to know what made Clemson go from a regularly 20s-ish ranked team to a national power? It happened to land 2 incredibly talented quarterbacks in a little run there. It had Watson that put it on the national stage, and then there was one little awkward year in between, and then they kind of said, oh, get out of the way. I'm going to give that baton over to Trevor Lawrence. And it had staying power because of that. And we saw what happened when Pitt finally got a good quarterback in 2021, when Kenny Pickett played like an elite quarterback. Having an elite quarterback at a program like Pitt that shows the ability to really produce next level talent at defensive line, at defensive back, on the offensive line every now and then. Running back has always been a key spot for the Panthers, and every now and then there's some talented receivers that come through. If you go through, you could make the argument that Pitt has had many years where if it just had better quarterback play, probably would have been 1 or 2 wins better than it was. And same goes for this year. Had they had a better quarterback, I think this is probably a 10-win Panther team rather than a 9-win Panther team. And so this is why it's big for Djokovic, who isn't a long-term investment by any means. It's his final year at the collegiate level. But if he can show, hey, Cignetti's offense is runnable and you can make plays and you can get next level attention. You can win football games through throwing through the air. It was just Keaton Slovis who was the problem. It's not the offense. They'll be able to hang on to 4-star quarterbacks and they won't lose them like they did with Kenny Minchie this past fall. And that's huge for the program right there. So that's why I said Whippeal, where you talk about, like you said, Adam, that whole group that won that ACC championship, they're mostly gone. It wasn't just Pickett. It was the offensive line. It was so many key players on the defensive side of the ball, other playmakers around Pickett, and they're going to hear their names called in the NFL draft in a couple months. It's a new core now, and a lot of it is local guys, and this local group will be the determining factor if Pitt regresses to being that 7-8 win team a year that, will go play in the Pinstripe Bowl or whatever bowl game kicks off at 2:00 on a couple days before New Year's Eve, or if it will be able to be competing for one of those now 12 spots in the college football playoff, which if you compete in the ACC, you're going to be in the mix for.
Yeah, I think if you can assert yourself as that number 2, number 3 team in the ACC, the sky's the limit there. So, Noah, let's talk before we cross the aisle and talk to the other shade of blue, the other party of football fans here. Let's talk a little bit about your Pitt Panther basketball team. Kind of a difficult one because I feel like we're at that awkward stage of the season where it's just really that last month here. So a lot of the good work has been done. I think a lot of the outlook is, if they follow that trajectory, you kind of know where things are going. But let me ask you, I guess, what's your assessment of the Panthers in the short term, but also in the long term? Is this something that can be sustained? What is the state of this program and not just this team?
Fun. And that's a word that has not been connected to Pitt basketball in a very long time, is fun. This is a fun team to watch. I'm not sure. I'm pretty confident it will make the national tournament. I'm not sure how far it will go, but there's a lot to be optimistic about. I think that Jeff Capel, if you go through his career, he's always showed the ability to recruit well. And he really knows how to work this transfer portal. And you go to just being a guy who covers the team on the road, every road reporter in the ACC for teams like Louisville that's struggling right now, or Georgia Tech, or other of these programs, their reporters are asking Jeff about how he went about the transfer portal and saying, hey, look at this Pitt team. This is how you need to do it. Unless if you're, a blue blood program that has all this NIL money that you can offer, if you're not one of those few, this is the way you do it. Follow what Pitt did. I'm not saying that's sustainable every single season, but I think one successful group allows you to sell yourself and have a little bit of clout and credibility to high school recruits. This incoming class, the class of 2023 that Pitt has as recruiting, it's number 25 in the nation. That's big. And they're only replacing 4 players from this current group. You're going to have guys like Federico and Blake Henson back. You plug in a couple of 4-star guards into there. You might have Dior Johnson and John Hughley returning as well. I think that this Pitt basketball team could be just as good, if not better, next year. And man, what would that do to have a very consistent basketball program in the ACC with a coach who knows how to recruit? I think that there's a lot to be excited about if you're a Pitt basketball fan right now. It's fun.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you said is true. I think my big question is, what is it sustainable? Or are we in a college basketball world where it's just going to be, 1 year Pitt's going to be, drawing jealousy from Jim Boeheim and he's making sarcastic comments, and maybe next year Jeff Capel's the guy who's sitting there salty because he didn't have such a great. Is that what the way the sport is going to be? Or are we going to? Is the concept of a program the way we understood Pitt basketball to be during its glory run? When you and I were growing up, is that something that is still possible? I think a big problem for Pitt right now is because it's been on the back burner for so long. the Pitt hardcores are fired up for this, but can you penetrate and get that next level of fan involved, the casual basketball fan? Because I think that's something I remember from those Pitt days is that, you know, I was kind of more in Penn State orbit, but I always watched Pitt. I watched every Pitt basketball game because it was just such an event. Can Pitt get back to that level where every home game's an event that you are fired up about watching, that you're making as appointment television? I don't know if they're there yet, and I think it's going to take more than 1 year to do that. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the concept of a program as a sustainable thing endures in this new college basketball environment.
Yeah, just to build upon that real quick, I think two things that would be encouraging for what you're looking for is, I mean, this program just had its first sellout in its last home game for the first time since Zion Williamson was in town in 2019. Now, one sellout isn't a reason to pronounce Pitt back, but it's a major step forward compared to the crowds it was drawing last season. People are starting to show up. I do think there's excitement. I mean, just look at what the web traffic is for Pitt basketball on our site right now compared to what it was last year. People are interested. People are talking about it, on the TV shows, on the local news, or on the radio and everything. It's becoming a little bit more of a talk of the town. It's not what it was when Jamie Dixon was here yet. But if you look, I mean, the Oakland Zoo is loud again. It's filled. Those kids are excited to be there, and things like that are huge. And to build upon staying ability, Pitt's in the perfect conference to be in right now, because the ACC has always had two powers, and both of them right now in the last couple of years just said goodbye to legendary head coaches. Those programs are under complete constructions. And while, North Carolina went to the national championship game last year, the Tar Heels have not been great. That run was impressive, but the Tar Heels have not been great since Roy Williams left. I mean, it's a team that's struggling back-to-back years now to place together 20 wins in the regular season. And Duke might never be the same after Coach K. It will be good, but how much longer how many seasons of not being ranked in the top 20 can Duke really survive before it's not able to get those 5-star recruits anymore? I don't know. It'll be interesting. What I'm saying is right now, the premier program in the ACC as far as competition goes is Virginia. And when you have a team like that, which is solid and it's won a national championship, doesn't play a sexy brand of basketball, it opens a window for a newcomer to also insert itself into the hierarchy conversation. So I think that there are a lot of opportunities for the Pitt basketball program moving forward here.
All right, Penn State fans, you've waited patiently in the gallery. You've been waiting to give your rounds of applause digitally. We're going to wrap up this speech with our Penn State policy conversation. Noah, what is your outlook for the Nittany Lions after winning the Rose Bowl, kind of coming back with authority this season after a couple down seasons that were, in some ways hampered by the pandemic? What do you see as the outlook for the Nittany Lions as they go forward here, and how can they make sure they get where they want to go?
All right, all the Pitt readers and viewers, I need you to mute your laptop or your TV for a little bit here. There's no more optimistic program or athletic team or whatever in this area right now than Penn State football. I genuinely believe that Penn State will be a top 10 team all next year in football. It returns so much talent. It's done so well in recruiting. And I look at Michigan, who knows what that coaching situation will be like. And it's also going to have sanctions looming over its head possibly. And Ohio State, I mean, back-to-back years with losses to Michigan, Ryan Day showed he's not Urban Meyer. I think that, Michigan's on the rise, but for how long? And Ohio State is clearly showing it's not what it once was. It's still very good. Don't get me wrong. Those two programs are still programs that Penn State has to prove it can beat and beat consistently. But this next year's Penn State team, it's probably going to be one of the most talented Penn State teams that's been around since at least the Paterno era, with a 5-star quarterback, so many playmakers, bringing in Cephas through the transfer portal. I love the backfield that they have. I think the additions they made to the offensive line just through high school recruiting is exciting, and that defense is going to be really good. I think the Nittany Lions could win the Big Ten and easily be in the college football playoff next year.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Noah. I think the outlook has a chance to be sunny, very sunny, possibly college football playoff, in the final 4-year format, 4-team format in 2023. I think they have a chance. My policy prescription, though, is that this passing game has to be more explosive.
Yep.
I think that you have an ability with that with Drew Aller, but can you bring him along? I think he has all of the tools. But you know who we've said that about? We said that about Anthony Morelli. We said that about Christian Hackenberg. Um, you know,
Trace McSorley. We said that
well, I
about
don't know
Sean
if Trace
Clifford.
McSorley was in the same, physical talent world is. I think they got the most out of Trace McSorley. I
Yeah.
think those other guys they named, I don't know that they got the most out of them, and they had that blue chip 5-star talent. And so, can you finally develop that guy? Can James Franklin kind of finally plant that flag in the ground and say this is a first round talent that we have, and we're going to go out and win with him? My big question is, did they do enough in the transfer portal with Dante Cephas, Malik McLean? You still have Keandre Lambert Smith in house. Is that trio going to be enough to be explosive? You're never going to be, I don't think, like Ohio State with Marvin Harrison Jr. Like you don't
Yeah. You're not going to
clearly
have
have
that with
that
either of
level of
them.
talent, but can you just be a little more explosive? Can you make that big play in that big moment when you're facing Ohio State at home and the wind is at your back? Can you protect Drew Aller? Can he make throws that Sean Clifford couldn't, that make the difference in that game? Penn State had that game. I don't want to say won, but it was there for them to take. Ohio State was wounded in their own building, and of all of those games Penn State has lost in recent years against the Buckeyes, I think this year's was the most painful. Because you were so close to the end and you could taste it. And for me, the big difference was that passing game was really just relying on Parker Washington that
Yeah.
day. Parker Washington's gone now. You need to be more diversified. You need to have multiple guys who can make plays down the field to get a key first down, to keep a drive going in a game like that, where at least you're getting 3 instead of, if you're not getting 7 every time, if you're not going to be scoring 50 points on Ohio State, you're at least getting 3, and you're not punting at those inopportune times because Ohio State's still good enough to make you pay. I think Penn State has a good chance to beat that team this year. Um, Michigan, I don't know. I don't know if they match up quite as well,
No, they
but
don't.
you don't need to beat both of them to have a really special season. You only need to beat one. As Ohio State showed, they slipped into the college football playoff that way. I think Penn State will be in the same position next year if it can beat one of those two teams.
Yeah. And like you said, I mean, I think this Penn State team, worst case scenario, should be another 10-win team. And then you move a year forward in 2024. It should be the best team in the Big Ten with Aller in year 3, with those running backs, with some of the offensive linemen. Like I said, the kid from Why I'm Missing, I think Williams is his name, I believe. That dude's going to be really good. I saw him play in the state championships a couple of times, and that's just one of a couple that they brought in. I just really like their recent recruiting classes. I think that they're trending upward, and with the coaching situations at the two teams ahead of them, you don't know what the stability of those programs are going to be like. I think that Penn State, if it doesn't make the playoff next year with the expanding in 2024 and the group that they'll have around, it's going to be a playoff team sooner rather than later.
Yes, and I mean it's still important to be a top 4 team too, Noah, because you get that all important bye. It's
Yeah.
you basically get to live in that easier half of the world if you can be a top 4 team, and I think that needs to be the expectation for Penn State, even if you're going into 2024. Don't just make the playoff with 12 teams. Put yourself in a position to win it, and I think that they can do that, but you have to show that you can be explosive in the passing game. You have to make yourself attractive to those 5. You have to make yourself attractive so that you're getting the next Marvin Harrison Jr. to come play with Drew Aller. That's kind of how I look at that.
Yep.
Folks, thanks for hanging with us. We're at the 44-minute mark. I think we're going to beat the president tonight. I think he's going to speak for a lot longer. Maybe the speaking time will be similar, but he'll be interrupted by applause. We don't have that problem here on the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel. Noah, any final thoughts before we let everyone go enjoy the real speech?
I don't know how many people will actually be enjoying that on either side of the aisle. I think it's just a thing that has to happen. But no, this was fun, Adam. Thanks for doing this. This was great.
Absolutely. Just a reminder, if you're joining us for the first time, please pop a like on this video to help us out with the YouTube algorithm. Please also subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos. We're going to have a lot more NFL draft talk this week with Christopher Carter on the North Shore Drive. Noah, I think you're going to be hosting. Chris is going out of town. I think you're hosting Monday, right?
I am, yes.
So stay tuned for that with Noah. I think, Noah, you also have the college show this week with Abby. Can you give us a quick preview of that?
I mean, we'll be just talking about, there are 3 teams in the area who are all fighting to make March Madness. Penn State has a huge game Wednesday night against Wisconsin. Pitt obviously plays Tuesday night against Louisville. Don't think that should be a very exciting contest. If it is, something went drastically wrong. But nonetheless, we're just going to keep looking over the college basketball landscape here. And if anything interesting is said at Pitt this week as well, we'll cover that. So a lot to cover there.
Very nice. And everyone, of course, check out the subscription deal down in the description. $6 for 6 months of access to postgazette.com. We'll get you through the rest of hockey season, the rest of college hoop season. It'll get you right up to Pirate Spring Training. So make sure you're signed up for that. Otherwise, we will talk to you again soon. A little bit of a long video. Thanks for hanging in there with us, but we felt it was a fun, creative way to kind of talk about all of our teams at one time. So thanks for stopping by.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down in the description.